I'll just say welcome to everybody. George and I are in California visiting family and sitting outside here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. And it's just good to see friends' faces again. So unfortunately tonight, Gwen Moore and her staff person had a conflict and didn't tell us till yesterday that they wouldn't be able to make it. They just discovered it. So they wanted to come to our July meeting. So we'll
And do a
see.
6-month report.
On the Biden administration.
Yeah, 6 months, yeah.
So Greg, you want to take it from here? You found a substitute program for us for the night?
Well, I guess you could call it that, yeah. Looked for something that we could get, a movie we could get on. Whoa, just a minute. Charlie Bensinger is having a hard time getting in here. Anyway, looked for something that we could get that was relevant on a really short notice, and eventually came to mind that we should probably take a look at a movie. I don't know if people have seen the original Kiss the Ground. It's kind of related to what we did in our March meeting. However, the full-length movie is close to an hour and a half long all by itself. So what I did was acquired rights for the shorter one, which is about 45 minutes, and maybe have some different and unusual, and I haven't seen it, some different content as it's been described. So I thought it might be interesting to take a look at that and and see how it goes. So,
family, has anyone seen this movie? I'm interested.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Okay.
So let me.
Planet Earth, home to a growing number of Homo sapiens and a whole lot of other creatures. It's a great place to live. But when it comes to the future of our small planet,
now to a dire warning about climate change.
Natural disasters like hurricanes or wildfires.
An unprecedented decline in nature threatening humanity.
6 mass extinction event is already well.
there's so much bad news about our planet. It's overwhelming. The fear that we're headed for a cliff puts most of us into a state of paralysis. The truth is, I've given up. And the odds are, so have you.
What are things that you're doing in your life to make an impact around climate change?
I mean, I like to, do my part when I can, like with my metal straw.
Going to the paper straws.
No plastic straws.
Paper straws versus plastic. Recycled straws. Every time I come here, I feel energized.
If recycling and paper straws are our only hope, we are in really big trouble. But what if there was another path? This is the story of a simple solution, a way to heal our planet and keep our species off the extinction list. In fact, the solution I'm talking about is right under our feet. And it's as old as dirt. We call it soil, earth, or ground. And due to its vast scale and its ability to sequester immense quantities of greenhouse gases, it could just be the one thing that can balance our climate, replenish our freshwater supplies, and feed the world. That's why some people are racing to save our soil, in hopes our soil just might save us.
I am a conservation agronomist. We get the soil right, we can fix a lot of our issues. Healthy soils lead to a healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human, healthy water, healthy climate. This is what this is about today. Learning how the soil works and learning how to farm like nature does.
The message is simple, but getting that message out is difficult.
We have a social problem. We have an education issue. And until we get that right, we can't fix our ecological issues. I have been in NRCS for 31 years. It was kind of amazing to me as I was teaching all over the country. I'm going, wow, our producers don't really know how the soil works. They don't understand the basic ecological principles. Everything runs by carbon. We're built by carbon. The soil microbes run by carbon. Carbon is the driving engine. It runs the system.
But when it comes to the role of carbon in our world, there's a bit of confusion.
What is carbon dioxide?
It's comes from
That's a trick question for me. You caught me off guard on that.
I guess that would be carbon and two molecules of whatever.
Something bad?
It's poison that you're breathing, and it will destroy you.
To be specific, carbon dioxide is a gas. We breathe it out, and plants breathe it in. We also make carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. But carbon isn't bad. In fact, it's the basis for all life on Earth.
There's a tendency right now for us to be at war with carbon. Carbon's the bad guy, and I think this is a lost opportunity. Carbon's the good guy. We're carbon. I'm 16% carbon, and all of it came from eating vegetation and things that eat vegetation.
Plants use sunlight as energy, and they pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They turn it into a carbon fuel, and that's how they grow. But 40% of that carbon fuel, they send down to their roots. They're leaking it out in a very strategic way to soil microorganisms. Plants are feeding soil microorganisms carbon, and the soil microorganisms are bringing plants mineral nutrients. And in the process of all that, those soil microorganisms make a carbon glue out of that carbon fuel. And they make habitat in the soil. They make little pockets in the soil to control the flow of air and water. And that's one of the ways that carbon gets fixed in the soil.
In other words, soil has the unique ability to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's a big deal. And what's even more amazing, the soil contains an entire universe of life.
Here I went to years of college, and I took soil science. I didn't know. I really did not know how the soil worked. It's alive.
In every handful of healthy soil, there are more organisms than the number of people who've ever lived on planet Earth. You sexy thing, you. And those organisms are processing organic matter that's in the soil and putting the nutrients into a form that the plant needs. Comparing the soil microbial diversity to the microbial diversity that we're now seeing inside the human organism. You have more bacterial cells in your body than you have human cells.
Yeah, we're about 1% human and 99% microbes. It's the truth.
The food that we eat, we actually chew and break that food material down into little bits that get eaten by the bacteria in our gut. When you eat kale, let's say. When you're eating kale, your body doesn't consume kale. The bacteria consume the kale. And you feed off of what the bacteria have processed and released by the consumption of that kale.
The key to health is eating dirt. And what I mean by that is we need to eat what's in the dirt that's transferred to the plants that then we eat and create health.
Taking care of the microbes in the soil is critical for human health. But spraying the soil with toxic chemicals, well, does something else.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Spraying the soil with toxic chemicals kills the very microbes we need to give us health and pull the carbon from the atmosphere. The more tilling that's done, the weaker the soil gets, and the more farmers feel compelled to use chemical sprays. This is the vicious cycle of industrial agriculture.
It takes more nitrogen now to raise a bushel of grain than it did in 1960.
Our chemical fertilizers mask the problem of degraded soils. Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Today, our most common crops are genetically altered to resist the spraying of toxic pesticides. For example, the #1 crop in the United States, field corn, is almost entirely sprayed with glyphosate, a chemical suspected to cause cancer that's so oversprayed, it's found its way into our drinking water.
These chemicals, which were considered dangerous to begin with, are now being used at rates that would have been inconceivable 20 years ago.
Every year, for every American alive, 3 pounds of toxic chemicals are sprayed onto the food grown on our farms.
That goes into the soil, it goes into the water, it goes into our bodies. It's not just on the food you eat, it's everywhere.
Most of the agricultural industry's pesticides and herbicides transfer directly through breast milk to babies. There are over 200 peer-reviewed studies that correlate the spraying of these toxic chemicals to effects like ADD in children, pediatric cancers, and birth defects. That's why juries have begun to award billions of dollars in damages to people who contracted cancer after using glyphosate.
We know, for example, that glyphosate, which is also known as Roundup, has an effect on the gut microbiome that may lead to disturbances that can create disease, including cancer.
A big reason these chemicals make us sick is because just as toxic chemicals kill the microbes in the soil, they also kill the microbes in our bodies.
What I tell people is, your body can handle acute stresses, but it cannot handle chronic stresses. Soil ecosystems the same way. If you keep dumping the fungicides, you keep dumping the herbicide, you keep dumping the insecticides, you keep doing the tillage, chronic stress, it doesn't function anymore.
Since chemical agriculture ramped up worldwide in the 1970s, we have lost 1/3 of the Earth's topsoil. But industrial agriculture isn't just harming our soils, it's also affecting something much larger.
The most massive tsunami, perfect storm is bearing down upon us. But fossil fuels, carbon, coal, and gas, are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. Now, because the fate of water and carbon are tied to soil organic matter, when we damage soils, you give off carbon. Carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
Healthy soils absorb water and carbon dioxide. But when we destroy soil, it releases water and carbon dioxide. This dries out the soil and turns it into dust. The process is called desertification. And how we deal with it could determine the fate of more than just our climate.
Desertification is a fancy word for land that is turning to desert. And this happens only when we create too much bare ground.
Soil and the plant and the climate are connected. If you don't have a living plant, you're going to have more evaporation. What we want is transpiration. When the moisture leaves through the plant, when it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases the humidity, we have more rain. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean. But a lot of people don't realize 40% comes from small water cycles where our rain comes from inland. What's going on is we disrupted the small water cycles. That's when you have too much sensible heat coming off bare soil. You're having these huge vortexes of hot air going out. Instead of attracting the rain, it's pushing the rain clouds away.
Take 1 square meter of soil and make it bare, and I promise you, you will find it much colder at dawn and much hotter at midday than that same piece of ground if it's just covered with plant litter. You have changed the microclimate. Now, by the time you are doing that on more than half the world's land, you are changing macroclimate.
According to the United Nations, the world's remaining topsoil will be gone within 60 years. In other words, unless we find a way to save our soils, we have 60 harvests left.
Let's do that. Do a couple demos.
The global scale of the problems we face may seem insurmountable. But in every fight that seems unwinnable, there are those who refuse to give up.
We're very fortunate to have Ray Archuleta with us today. Ray, as you can tell, is someone that has quite a bit of notoriety. He's got his own reality show. Now that doesn't happen. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ray. And Ray, we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Ray. This is a supercomputer model by NASA. We're concerned of the red and purples being CO2. I want you to notice the dates. That is February, March. Now, what are we doing March, April? What do we do in modern agriculture in April? We are tilling. We're tilling the land. and look at the huge plumes of CO2. Look at the dates. May. Now, let's see what happens around June. Look at the colors change. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in June? Do you see how powerful the living plants are? Can you imagine if we had all our rangeland and all our cropland covered? A covered planet is a healthy planet.
The first seasoned environmentalist and the editor of Draw Down, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Please welcome Paul Hawken. Tell us why your plan is different and why it is the most comprehensive.
Well, it's very different because it's the first one ever. You cannot achieve drawdown without biosequestration. Biosequestration is using plants, trees, perennials, and techniques of grazing and farming to capture carbon and store it in the sink of the soil and retain it for decades, if not centuries. What we did is map, measured, and modeled the 100 most substantive solutions to global warming. And what I mean by solutions, I mean things that are at hand. We know how to do it. They're scaling. And if we continue to scale in a rigorous but reasonable way over 30 years, we can reverse global warming.
When you talk to people about this great technology that has existed for millions of years, that takes carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it safely in the soil, and that it's called plants working with soil microorganisms, it seems too simple.
If we are going to succeed in balancing our climate, we do need to switch to renewable energies. But none of that will alter the tremendous amount of carbon we've already put into the atmosphere. Since 1750, when the Industrial Revolution began, we've pumped about 1,000 billion tons, also known as gigatons, of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's called our legacy load of carbon. And even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, that legacy load of carbon will still be there.
That legacy load of carbon dioxide is still going to be warming the atmosphere for decades, if not centuries. So if all we talk about is reducing emissions, it's not enough.
If electric cars and solar panels aren't enough, then what is the solution?
The only goal that makes sense for humanity is drawdown, a year-to-year reduction in carbon in the upper atmosphere. Anything else is climate chaos. If we want to achieve drawdown, we have to go thank the earth and start to farm and grow our plants and trees in an entirely different way. Once you achieve drawdown, within 20 years, you have cooling. You have the beginning of cooling. So now we have a horizon that if you're 20, 30 years old, you can say, in my lifetime, we can achieve this.
In other words, the very practices that heal our soils will also heal our climate. To stabilize the Earth's climate, we can use the most powerful carbon capture technologies: the photosynthesis of plants and the microorganisms in the soil. And the one type of farming that does this the best and draws down the most carbon is based on the concept of regeneration, which simply means to repair the damage we've done and make things better.
So we are sitting in a food forest. This is agroforestry. It's agriculture through trees, tree diversification. I've got an avocado tree, banana tree, fig tree, coffee trees. We went from a monocrop of single Haas avocado to now having about 40 different fruit varieties on site. 'Cause my home is where my food is grown. I'm going back to the earth. By diversifying, we can now have harvests every month. If you're looking to do something that would greatly impact Mother Earth, plant a tree. You don't need acres and acres and acres to build a food forest. You really just need a few hundred square feet. You're gonna look outside one day and go, what is something we buy every day at the grocery store that instead of waiting for it to be shipped around the world to me, what can I put in my own backyard that I can do myself? And to truly be forgiven, we must all get back to living with the land in harmony. I'm going back to the earth. I'm going back.
Regenerative agriculture grows more food per acre. It's scalable to our entire agricultural system, and what's more, it's already being done right now, today.
So I'm taking you to a field here that is a multi-species cover crop. The purpose of a cover crop is to enhance the life and the function of the soil. Think of it this way, if I'd grow a monoculture on this field, would only be feeding the soil biology one type of root exudate. I'm growing 19 species here. We're accelerating biological time. We're feeding the soil biology what it would take a conventional farmer 19 years to do. I'm doing it in 1 year. So people might ask, how do you get any money from this thing? Our livestock will graze this during the winter, speeding up the process of regenerating those soils. Animals grazing living plants are a part of the carbon cycle. Here in the northern plains, our soils were formed by large herds of bison and elk being moved by predators, grazing a landscape, trampling that carbon, the plants onto the soil surface, not coming back for maybe a year, allowing full recovery.
It wasn't that long ago that over 60 million buffalo roamed the continent, and the people who lived here for millennia knew exactly how to coexist with those animals.
My name is Charging Eagle of the Oglala Lakota of the 7 Council Fires. There was this story of Creator Tukashila telling our people to follow the buffalo, and the buffalo will show you where your lands are. This whole area, this whole region belonged to our people, the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota Nation. My ancestors, they lived in a period of time when everything came from nature. You can actually drink from the rivers, eat what was caught in the rivers, gather berries. Everything was a part of this bigger circle. And the buffalo meant the world. The buffalo meant everything to us. We became the buffalo. We were known as the Buffalo Nation. We didn't see ourselves as above animals or below animals. We were just right there with them. And they took care of us. We became a part of that bigger system.
In an attempt to starve the Native Americans, the U.S. military and the railroads killed most of the buffalo. By the time the culling ended, only a few thousand of the majestic animals remained.
When you become a part of what I call the accumulation culture, when you live in that culture, you're going to lose track of what it means to be a part of something else. Because when you start to accumulate, you tend to forget what is important, and you become separate. The more you become separate, the unhappier you're going to become because you're going to want more and more and more. Accumulation is like an addiction. It's part of this illness, this addiction, that prevents us from being sustainable with nature. I mean, being thankful for this earth, for this piece of ground that we have. We have to look at all of these things, the global warming, the loss of drinking water, all of these negative things happening, the violence, the war. All of that is all rooted in that accumulation cultural mindset. We have to be able to let some of that go now. We have to say, okay, we've done enough. Enough's enough. That's where we're at right now, and it can be done.
Recent studies show that when cows are kept on pasture and constantly moved, like the buffalo, they not only help sequester carbon, they help rebuild entire ecosystems. That's regeneration. A new breed of farmers and ranchers are using hooved animals to restore damaged land.
I was raised in a rural area in Washington, adopted by a Lakota elder. We were out in nature every day. I found permaculture, and that was very influential in my life, where I could see that there could be a permanent agriculture, an agriculture that not only fed the planet, but also fed the people in a way that regenerated and didn't deplete resources.
Holistic ranchers like the market guards use careful planning so their cows sequester carbon and actually regenerate the land.
Cows can be good. That is one of the most controversial statements of mankind at this point. Using cattle, allowing them to roam and graze and planned grazing can literally revive enough space to create a tremendous amount of drawdown. I'm from Southeast Louisiana. I grew up in an incredibly delicate ecosystem. Conservation was always a very serious part of my life. I had no idea that the earth was desertified. I got on a plane from New York City to fly to Zimbabwe to meet Alan Savory, so he could show us the difference between desertification and regeneration. Land that has been holistically managed through planned grazing using cattle, the most vilified animal in the world.
We are in Africa right now, driving through a field that has been under Alan Savory's holistic management for 9 years, and it is in Eden. This is what you call high grass.
Using livestock to reverse desertification is totally scalable to about 2/3 of the world's land, and nothing else is. And frankly, that can be done at extremely low cost.
Here we are. This is what it should be like. You've been working on this land for 8 or 9 years. It went from a place of turning into a total desert and using hooved herding herbivores. You have literally transformed that, what we've been seeing, into this. How in the hell do you make this happen?
So the dung, the urine, and the hooves of the animals are what cause this grass to grow. That livestock is never on more than a hectare of this land, about 2.5 acres, never more than 3 days.
Right.
And they're never back on that piece of land under about 6 to 9 months.
Wow.
So no plant can get overgrazed. You can come any day of the year, anywhere on this land, and you will see no livestock, because they will be on less than 1 hectare of land. Unless we take you there, you won't even know it.
dealing with this beast of climate change, a lot of people don't understand that this helps climate change. This sequesters carbon. This takes the one thing that we so desperately need out of the air, and it holds it, and it makes oxygen.
Yeah, if we can produce solid grassland, you can pull down enormous amounts of carbon back into the soil. 2/3 of the world, roughly, is grasslands and savannas where the rainfall is too low to support a solid canopy of trees giving you soil cover. So grass is essentially what has to stabilize that soil.
You look at this and you realize this is what the world should look like. This is what Africa should look like. This is what South and Central America should look like. This is what Texas should look like. This is how we win. We can get the earth back to the Garden of Eden that it once was by regeneration.
When used smartly, herbivores can pull down carbon and reverse desertification. But it doesn't just work for Africa. It works everywhere in the world.
The form of agriculture that we use creates billions of lives in the form of soil microbes, in nematodes, in grassland birds. All of that wildlife is flourishing under an agriculture system versus a tilled crop field, which is denuded of life.
The odds are there are some things that you can do to save our soils today.
Compost is the natural decomposition of organic matter in nature. In a forest floor, it's when the leaves drop, the fungi and bacteria take it over and literally build the soil at the root zone. Compost is all about community. From the community of microbes that are breaking down the pile to the community of individuals in Los Angeles that are physically turning and sifting and contributing to that pile.
Everyone is connected to the soil. Everybody is connected to the soil, no matter who you are, what color, male, female, it doesn't matter where you come from. We're all connected to the soil, and for me, I'm concerned about that 1 inch, right? That takes years to develop 1 inch of soil. I collect food scraps from restaurants, manure from zoos, manure. Do you know why? To keep this stuff out of landfills and use it to make good, rich dirt. That's why. How do we take waste and repurpose and reuse it, because it's really not waste?
There are continents and other really large regions that are getting hit with a double whammy of higher temperatures and drought. This kills soil, it kills life. One of the solutions to that challenge is to collect the food scraps from cities like San Francisco, turn them into compost, and get it onto local farms, and that helps them retain water because compost is a natural sponge. The unfortunate reality is most trash or garbage gets incinerated or sent to a landfill. We collect our food scraps, we put them in the green bin, it goes off to Recology's compost facility, we turn it into compost and it gets on a farm. That's a simple solution.
Compost is just one of a suite of soil-based carbon capture solutions. The more we choose regenerative foods, the more the farmers will grow them.
We're at a critical moment in human history. There could be a way to eat food that heals the planet. The way we're articulating it is the regenerative diet. If we do eat meat, We need to eat meat that comes from pasture-raised, grass-fed, humanely killed animals.
This is the most crucial choice all of us can make for the future of the planet. What are we eating? What kind of farming systems are we supporting? Are we regenerating the earth or are we degenerating?
If you look over here, we have my neighbor's land that has been chemical fallowed. It has had nothing growing on it for over a year, except for the few Roundup-resistant weeds that are on here. It's an ecological desert. Then you look over at our paddocks. You have a diversity of different plant species. You have insects, you have wildlife, plus the livestock grazing on it. We're capturing sunlight from early in the spring till late in the fall, converting that sunlight into liquid carbon to drive and fuel the system. There you have soil. Over on this side, you have dirt. Where do you want your food to come from? Which model do you want your food to be produced from? The answer is pretty simple to me.
All over our planet, people are using the practices of regeneration to heal the land and balance the climate. Some of these projects are big.
We know that about 25% of the world's land mass has been degraded by human beings over historical time. When we look at the cradles of civilization, Greece and Rome, we find that many of these places have turned into deserts. The sand is blowing across the ruins of once great civilizations. The List Plateau, the cradle of Chinese civilization, was the place where settled agriculture first began. When I was asked to film the baseline study in the List Plateau, I found myself alone, standing on a mountaintop, and I could look in 360 degrees and there was no vegetation. This was fundamentally ecologically destroyed. It was called the most eroded place on Earth, filled with miserably poor people. So I felt that I had to spend the rest of my life dealing with this. It was hard to imagine at that time that you could restore that. So from about 1994 till 2009, 14 years, an area of 35,000 square kilometers, approximately the size of Belgium. They had the top Chinese scientists, they had international scientists from the World Bank supporting them. They created mapping systems with satellites so that every watershed had a unique address. The results were stunning. Hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty. We met people who were illiterate, and their children now go to the top universities in the country. Human beings emerged in paradise. If we restore all the degraded land on the earth, we can return to paradise. If we start now to build a restoration economy, a regeneration economy, this is the way forward to see a stream return and flow, to bring back fertile soils, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated. This is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction.
When I look into your eyes, it's like watching the night sky or a beautiful sunrise. Oh, there's so much they hold.
So let's restore a little bit of paradise every day. It's not that difficult. If we stop distracting ourselves with shiny objects and we start to think about what's really important to us, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated. This is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction and the meaning of our lives.
We're all in this together. Every action that we take affects every other action, like a ripple in the pond. So what decision are you going to make that will make a positive impact on this beautiful planet so that our great-grandchildren, 7 generations in the future, can actually go up and hug an old-growth redwood tree and swim in clean waters and be able to open their mouths and drink while they're swimming? And what is it that we can do today so that our children can flourish in the abundance that we've created by our decisions?
When you are at your best in the world, a lot of the times you're feeling your best in nature. You're at your best in nature, and there's something there. There's something ancient there. The wisdom of that, it's sacred. It's one path to being happy in the world.
It's not about religion. It's not about politics. It's about love. And if you love something or you love somebody, you want to understand them, and you want to take care of them and protect them and keep them safe. And that's what we're all here to do. Even the little mycorrhizal fungi and the worms and the bacteria. And if we take care of them, they'll take care of us.
From the smallest microbes to the largest creatures, our blue planet pulses with life. For millions of years, it has self-healed and self-balanced. But today, our species faces its biggest test. Our mission is simple. We must harness the regenerative power of Earth itself. I'll make you a deal. I won't give up, and neither should you.
Even the stars, they burn. Some even fall to the earth. We got in line to learn. God knows we're worth it. No, I won't give up. I don't want to be someone who walks away so easily. I'm here to stay and make the difference that I can make. I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up.
In the emails, up in the top section where there's action links, one of those links is to our March meeting at which John Peck spoke. And in that section, there are 10, maybe 12 links for a variety of things. One of them is a link which will do a Google search basically to find local sources for food, specifically meats, generally free range, beef, chickens, and pork are a little bit more expensive, but if you can afford to spend a little bit more money in order to buy food, which really promotes what they were talking about in this film, and more specifically what John Peck was talking about during the March meeting. That's a resource where you can find something where you can find food which will be better for the earth. And again, it's the link at the top of today's email, actually emails for the last 2 months, basically has that link in it. So you can follow that and it'll find you. Actually, when I started checking that out, there are probably a dozen or maybe even 20 local places where you can find food, which is better for the environment. We did watch, my wife and I watched the original full-length version of this, which contains a lot more specific material. It's on Netflix, if you happen to be a Netflix subscriber. Many of the people that were in this one, it goes into the regenerative farmers, the woman in Washington who was raising the cattle and stuff, goes into more full-length investigations or explorations of exactly what it is they're doing and what they're finding, and well worth watching.
Well, thank you, and thanks for getting this together. This would not be a typical question and answer period, but more of a discussion period. And I think that we should take people one at a time in case there's a question, and then take people to respond to that question. Is that fair to everyone?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Also, we need to raise your hand mechanically within the Zoom system by going to the bottom of your screen under reactions. And there you can raise your hand. And I can see digitally the rank of who's raising hands. So let's please use that feature. All right with everybody?
Sure.
Okay, we begin. Who wants to begin this discussion? Please raise your hand.
I can see clap. Who's that? How about thumbs up?
Okay, here we go. So we've got Linda Frank first. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I want to reiterate the thanks for setting us up with this movie. I had watched the full version as well, and it was good to see this again. I wanted to mention that there were, in this version anyway, there were 2 suggestions that they offered for an urban environment. One was doing composting, and another one is being very intentional about your food choices, like Greg was talking about. And those are great suggestions. But I think I would like to have us do an exploration of more ways that we can adopt promoting soil health and biodiversity and connected habitats, even in the urban environment. And I think we need to do that. So that includes the practices that we use for our own gardening, whether it be vegetable gardening, and also our plant beds, putting in native perennials with a good biodiversity. So I think that's something that we can promote in Milwaukee. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda's brought up the point of exploring more ways. We've got a couple people on the stack I'm going to try to keep track of in terms of Chris and Patricia. But if anybody wants to chime in terms of suggestions within our urban setting of more ways to do regenerative agriculture, I think we should talk about that right now since it's come up. So please raise your hand. We're going to put Chris and Pat on the side. And anyone in terms of more ways in our urban setting?
I'd like to say something.
Speak louder.
This is Julie. Well, I'm just in the process of
trying to grow new grass in my backyard, and I'm feeling very guilty about it because I think I should be doing something other than just grass. Especially, there's some areas that you want to be able to entertain in and put some chairs around and have friends over and be able to walk on the grass, but that doesn't have to be everywhere. And so I'm starting to rethink what I'm going to do when I get home from this vacation that we're on. And maybe I'm going to rethink some of that planting I attempted to do before we left. And I need some ideas, what can you plant and that is, adaptable to a kind of a shady city area that's going to be really good for the soil. And so I need some research on that, I suppose. But it does hit home.
Okay. Anyone else for more ways within our urban setting to do regenerative agriculture? We're holding a couple people, but either raise your hand or speak up, please.
I just, when Julie asked about that in particular, isn't clover a good answer? I knew a guy, he said decades ago that clover was his answer. He was turning all of his grass into clover. And so I just wondered if anybody thought that was a good idea.
Mm-hmm. It is. So I can respond to that a little bit. And there is a micro clover, but the land use group of the Milwaukee Task Force has been looking at this, and they discovered that the micro clover is not native, so that's an issue with that. And there are some alternatives that have been identified, and unfortunately, I can't tell you which ones those are, but we do have some research on that.
Thank
you.
Well,
thanks, Linda. Jeannie has chimed in on the chat, speaking in terms of Weston A Price Foundation is a good resource. Jeannie, would you like to speak to that?
Hi, yeah. Well, I've been a part of Weston A Price for a number of years, and they would give talks on different ways of eating that are healthy, and they actually have emphasized meats. And I've said, well, you have people who are vegan, and there's so many different ways to eat, but they explain about what they were just saying in the film, that you need to have the animals, that it helps helps the soil. It's a whole important process. And they help people with eating a healthier diet, and they are good at finding regional or local farmers that you can then get things from, like grass-fed beef and milk that is healthy milk. They're a good resource, and they have publication out and stuff. Some of their attitudes on vaccines, I question, but in general, I find them to be a very interesting organization.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Also in the chat, Jim Schultz has chimed about the Merchants of Doubt in terms of being a good double feature with this film. Jim, you want to mention anything about the Merchants of Doubt?
I just wanted to say, if folks haven't seen the movie, they should see it. I think it makes a great lead into this movie because it gets your blood boiling about. It shows how they took the same lawyers and supposed scientists that for decades told us cigarettes were good for us, they were healthy for us, and there's no cancer coming from it. And they hired those people to teach us that climate change is a fairy tale. The earth naturally changes all the time. Don't worry about it. Go back to living your life the way America has been selling it to you. And this one kind of gives you the answer to those to help put you in the right direction. I think they would make a good double team.
Thank you, Jim. So we've explored that discussion. Let's go back to the original stack. Patricia Sumnich.
What I was going to say relates directly to regenerative gardening or farming. Go to the website if you want to enrich your soil. Go to chipdrop.com, chipdrop.com, and you will be connected with a tree trimmer in the area, and they will come and dump a load of wood chips on your driveway or wherever you want them. And then you can transfer those into your garden areas, and it makes really good, rich soil.
Well, thanks, Patricia. Chris Meyer.
Yeah, couple things. I don't know if anybody caught the latest Nova on PBS called The Secret Mind of Slime. It is unbelievably fascinating. We're talking about dirt. The things that are going on underground are just incredible. If you look at the root of a plant and you take off and you subtract like the very end about that much, the next piece about that much is like the brain of the plant. The one scientist said he thinks of plants as like upside down people where the brains are in the ground. I mean, the whole thing, slime that remembers and can teach others slime. It's just a fascinating show. But this movie, and we're suggesting sharing it. I'm thinking, does anybody have Bill Gates' address?
All right, Chris.
Thank you.
Hanging up the
Chris,
slide.
I'm sorry, would you repeat the name of that show on Nova?
The Secret Mind of Slime.
Yes. And Chris, could you add that to the chat? And also, Pat, you added another resource earlier. Add that to the chat, please, and we'll all have it.
Chip drop.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. Terry Wiggins.
How do I add it? Bruce.
Yeah, it's Bruce actually here, both of us here.
Well, that's okay. You're welcome, Bruce.
Thanks. So there are certain things we can do as individuals, but an important element here is that we need to look at systems. And one of the things we can do in urban areas is not just composting individually and looking at our own properties, while that's important, but we can also look at getting municipalities to be picking up organic wastes and taking them out of landfills. There's two reasons that's important. One is that organic waste in landfills creates methane, which is an even more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. But also, it can be turned into compost and used in a variety of ways. So Linda mentioned the city-county task force. I'm co-chair of the waste work group, and we're looking at that, working with the city. The city had a pilot program for collecting organic wastes, and they've been looking to try to find ways to make it go citywide. There's some hurdles at this point that we're investigating, but all our municipalities ought to be collecting organic waste and turning it into compost. That's an important element. And I'd like to suggest wherever you live, you work with your local municipalities to see if you can get an organic waste collection system along with your trash and recyclables.
Thank you, Bruce. And I just want to mention here that Bruce has brought up the book Drawdown to our community here, way in the beginning. And he's brought that to the city county task force. And I just want to thank you for being a proponent of that, Bruce.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Linda and I are presenting to the Sierra Club on Monday night. I'll be talking about Drawdown, Linda talking about the city county task force, And we have another woman who works over at the Weir Nature Center. We're going to talk about how to have conversations on climate change. So if you go to the Great Waters group of the Sierra Club, that'll be Monday night at 6:30.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you, Linda. And thank everybody for our work in terms of education around this issue with other organizations. It's all good. Jim Schultz. We got you on the stack now. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
yeah,
okay.
Jim, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, since it was brought up about chip drop, we also have in our community free resources for getting both compost and mulch. I know in Waukesha, I can go to the what used to be our 98% efficient incinerator and pick up mulch and compost by as big a bin as I can haul out of there. And when I was living in Milwaukee, we could go down to 35th Street and get compost and mulch from there also. So rather than going to Stein's or some other local garden center, we should be letting our friends know that the county has the trees that they trim and that kind of stuff is available for us to go down and get at no cost.
Yeah.
All you gotta have is an ID that shows you're a Milwaukee County resident, or out here in Waukesha County resident. And out here, they never even check. You could be from Illinois and come up and get compost and mulch. So the stuff is available. We just need to make sure we let everybody know where we can go and find it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Jim. You know, this discussion is evolving, and as activists, our biggest tool is education. And I'm wondering if somebody would want to take lead in terms of this conversation about regenerative agriculture and local sources. We talked about a bunch of them here. I think if we made up a flyer, it would be very useful and useful to our own membership.
Yeah, I think we could publish that information on our newsletter that Greg Walter puts out regularly.
Yeah. Great. So I'm putting out a challenge. Anybody want to take lead in working with what's in the chat in this discussion today and doing a simple, maybe half-page flyer? We've got that pregnant pause here.
Like an information flyer?
Yes.
Yeah, just the sources for some of these
that
things.
we've been talking about.
Local sources.
It'll be in the chat, and it'll also be in the recording that'll be available of this meeting.
And there are a bunch of links and Google searches, automated Google searches on the website already.
Yeah.
So it's a good place to start. I mean, if someone wants to help work on that, I'll work along with them.
I will work along with somebody else.
But
That way I shall not fail alone.
Are you saying you won't work with Greg?
I said I absolutely will. Yeah, no, I just don't want to do it alone.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good. We got to start.
All right.
Start. All good. Charlie Benzinger's next on the stack. Charlie.
Yeah, I just want to say that's a wonderful movie. You know, it's one of the few uplifting climate change related films that anybody's produced so far. You know, so many of them are just sort of doom and gloom with not a lot of really positive solutions. But in terms of composting, we have a group called Compost Crusaders here in Milwaukee, and they serve the Shorewood area, I know, and they'll pick up your, your kitchen waste. I think every other week they come by, you get a little brown bin. I don't know, and they turn it into really nice compost. I don't know how much of the city they cover, but they're here and they've been at it for quite a few years. They've been, expanding their operations. They have some pretty big trucks now. So I think that's something to check out.
Well, thanks a lot, Charlie.
Yeah, they collect every week now, and they're in Shorewood as well as Milwaukee, and you have to pay a little bit for it, but you get a break on the price of compost you get back. So that is a good suggestion if you're not going to do that yourself, or your local municipality can't do it. So that is a good suggestion, Charlie.
Okay.
Good. Julie didn't mention it, but she used to go to the city Milwaukee Police Department, their horse barn.
To get manure.
Yes.
Manure,
Yes.
yeah, for free.
Horse manure.
And the zoo too. Zoo did.
Elephant manure.
Elephant manure, yes.
So this is going well. Want to open a new stack if you want to take it in a different direction as we talk about regenerative agriculture. Anyone for the stack?
Well, I think this is a real hopeful film for the fact that nature can recover too. And one thing I thought I saw in the original film, and someone correct me on this if I'm wrong, but if a tree is cut down even, the root system will still capture the carbon. So for someone like me that hates to see people cutting down the trees, I'm thinking, wow, this is a great thing that nature is fighting back and still doing something to save the earth. I don't know. Does anyone know if that's really true or not? Or
I just saw something or heard something where they were talking about all of the wonderful things about the dead trees and stuff if you just leave them, and these little animals that like to get inside and burrow and live in them, and all of the bugs that like to I mean, it was like, please leave some of your dead plants for the animals and bugs. So I think you're right.
Oh, okay, well then great. I mean, I thought
I don't think it certainly won't work as much as a whole tree, because it's the leaves that soak in the carbon dioxide and then send it down to the roots. So if a tree's cut down, it'll decompose and add to the organic material in the soil, but it won't be sequestering the carbon dioxide.
Oh, no, I don't think it's as good as having the live tree either, but to me it's some consolation that if the tree is being cut down, at least some of the soil is capturing the carbon. I mean, I'm hopeful that this is still something like we're having some construction done on Calhoun here where they are cutting down these huge trees, and it's just making me sick. And I was just hoping to get some hopeful signs out of this.
Well, that is hopeful. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bruce. We've got Linda on the stack. Linda Frank.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about leaving the dead material, because it's true that a dead tree in the forest provides a lot of habitat, and should not be removed. There are different concerns when it's in the city. So, but as Chris was mentioning, not only trees, but leaving your plant material. I was picking up some stalks from a native plant perennial at the end of the season. And after cutting that all off, I realized there were hundreds of little caterpillars in there. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that again. Because no, really, we want to leave that plant material. It's good for the little creatures, and it's good for the soil to leave that there, and clean it up in the spring. I have a couple of things that I'm struggling to get an understanding of on this whole topic, and one is about replenishing soil health, and I think we just have to go forth and follow the practices and do what we can, but at the same time, I have read scientific reports that say it can take a century, you know, to actually restore the organic health to land that has been disturbed by conventional agriculture. So that's just one of those things that, you know, as it usually is, rule number one, don't mess it up to begin with. Because it's not that easy to put back in place.
Yep.
You know, and one other thing I'll just bring up is that this version of the film didn't go much into the various regenerative agriculture practices other than cover cropping. But I noted that in our session that we had in March, on the question of no-till, which was mentioned in the film, and that can be a really critical part of this whole thing, because nothing disturbs the soil organisms more than this plowing.
Yes.
However, our speaker responded on that question by saying that when farmers do no-till, they're using more herbicides and they're using more herbicides because then you have more difficulty with weeds. So, you know, that's one of those questions out there.
Well, thank you. We're having some internet problems here that it's showing. I just want to mention two things before handing it over to Julie to finish up. Please check the chat. Jean has brought up not to put black walnut mulch in vegetable gardens. Linda, for organic and native plants, try Weber's. And I know Julie likes Weber's. And Jeannie's also mentioned The Man Who Planted Trees is another good film, short of animation. So, you know, time is ticking on us. I want to hand it over to Julie right now. And thank you, everybody, for this discussion.
So, folks, this was very hopeful, and it's the real bright light, I think, that we can shine on this issue. And I think we should try to get it into as many schools as we can, and that might be a project that we could take on, even individually. If you know teachers, high school teachers in particular, that you could show this, or junior high.
Oh, we have a core that we've worked with before, high school teachers. There's a couple of them who
we do have some contacts, and I think that would be very hopeful for the students to see this and to know that there is a future for them if we do the right things. And right now, many of us have grandkids, and we really realize that they need hope in their lives. So this film is a real good source. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
So in closing, what we've learned today is that we need to keep our dead plant life in the ground. Keep the roots in the ground and things of that nature, and keep it in the ground reminds me of our chant. I think I'd like to close it with that. Can everybody do that with us?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Please have to unmute.
What?
Everyone has to unmute.
Yes, everybody unmute, please. All right, repeat after me. Climate justice.
Climate
Yes.
Keep it in the ground.
Keep
Keep it in the ground.
Keep the oil under the soil.
Keep the oil under the soil.
Keep the gas under the grass.
Keep the
gas
gas under the grass.
Keep the coal in the hole.
Keep the coal in the hole.
System change.
System
change.
change.
Not climate change.
Not climate
Climate
change.
change.
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
Sustainable life.
Sustainable life.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.